Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Paz from the Two Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me, my co-host, the pro wrestling financial genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. I had a good time deep diving into TNA last time and in checking out the website of our official business podcast partner, PW Ponderings, with their recent news covering MLW's Kojima winning the belt and Sami Callihan's relationship with the promotion. It made me want to do another deep dive.
Yes, this time, of course, talking about the state of MLW. What is going on with Major League Wrestling right now? Because big shakeup, obviously, over the weekend.
Yeah, so it seems like an interesting time to sort of figure out what is going on in a post lawsuit world. I feel like they're still trying to find their footing, and we're trying to figure out, are they ascending, are they descending, stabilizing, whatever it is. So certainly a surprise over the weekend with Satoshi Kojima winning the belt from Alex Kane. Kojima, a big proponent of gluten. He loves the bread.
Yes, good
according
point.
to according to his Twitter, I have to be a little bit careful with bread these days into my 40s, but glad he enjoys it so much. So a little throwback to the past. I was actually at that one show that they did at the Manhattan Center, covering
Oh,
when he had, I forget if he won the belt or he was defending the belt or whatever it may be, but a lot of fun at that show, but certainly a throwback to the past. So with MLW, their contract situation is always up in the air more than anyone else, where you may hear that this talent has a contract to last for years, and then suddenly a few weeks later it's up, and you think another contract that they just signed it, but actually not the case. So partly it's probably a communication issue, but some big movement here with Fatu now finishing up. I believe his match that's promoted in the future has already been recorded. Sami Callihan coming in on a handshake deal. Of course, Hammerstone left. And we even have recent news of um, Fish, coming in, a sort of a cousin to us from the the Creative Control family,
yes.
his very popular podcast. So, hello, Bobby. Although we've never met, fan of his work from Ring of Honor. So, Bobby Fish kind of feels like the type of talent that they would bring in these days. Each is unique, but a known talent, one with particular buzz in certain ways, but maybe depending on the person or the fan, a little bit controversial in their own way. And they're trying to find their footing, right? It wasn't too long ago. They're like, Microman will bring in the kids. And I'm not even sure if he's there anymore. We started seeing him on GCW.
Yeah,
I
elsewhere.
see,
Yep.
yeah, I see the clips of some funny stuff over there. And then suddenly there's like death matches where, like, see, it looks pretty. I mean, typical death match, but looks pretty gruesome. And like we were talking about, John, when you were in the audience, I was curious, like, if any families were there and were like, what's going on here? So like, who is their audience? So before we move on to distribution, John, anything else about the talent and sort of the movement there?
Very interesting. They keep bringing in like legends sporadically. Legends to me, of course, would be Kojima, Yuji Nagata, just guys, Japanese legends. Obviously, some Mexican legends as well because they brought in Mistico. So I feel like they're just keep bringing in guys, which is a good thing. It's always nice to have those nice names in the card. It's always nice when I was backstage last month at MLW and running into Kojima and I'd be able to get a picture with him. So I'm like, oh, and he's super friendly, super nice guy. So that was awesome. But it's cool, like when you could have your talent of roster, but then also put on the poster like, oh, we got Kojima here, and now he's the champion. So I don't know. To me, and maybe that's just being like an old school mark, an old school fan. I like having a lot of those legends readily available And especially you can say, wow, he was the original MLW champion. So I think that's cool. It stinks on Fatu because obviously I feel like he's been one of the better wrestlers in the world for a while, and maybe a bigger platform like WWE might be in his future. But I feel like losing Fatu is a big one. Losing Hammerstone, I felt like was a big one. Sami Callihan just working on the handshake agreement. Who knows like when he'll be in and out. So one of those things where I don't know, they're a little bit in flux some of the talent, but I do like this thing where they bring in the legends. I do enjoy that.
Yeah, so certainly where you could bring in the free agent names and where they're playing now, they're talking about running more shows, but probably on average less than one a month. How much work can you give talent? And you could have exclusive contracts to a degree, but it's more like a first choice contract because the wrestlers generally, I would imagine, have to work elsewhere to make a full time living or to supplement whatever contract that they have from MLW. But I think one thing that certainly, like, you can't have Fatu forever. He's an ascending star, and hopefully he lands very well. But to sort of like lose that core where you're bringing in people, but even like Alex Kane, he emerged, I would say, on the like semi-national stage, at least to me, with MLW, and he hadn't had the belt for very long. It looked like he was doing well. He had a unique style. The Bumaye thing, was getting over. It was just like a unique personality, and to go back to Kojima feels a little bit retro. And again, I'm not watching every week, so it might be the right time to do that. But you sort of have to play Moneyball a little bit in terms of like who's available, what's the best price, and make the most use out of it. And certainly at this level, and even at the level of Impact, you have to do the trade-off in terms of like what about a certain talent might be like turning people off, like what opinions might they have, or for some what might they have been accused of or currently undergoing in the legal process or in the court of public opinion, and say ultimately will it benefit my brand to take the risk or not.
Business wise, do you think it's smart to have guys exclusively to you? Or do you think like financially it's okay to let them venture off and do different shows as long as maybe you have right to first refusal? But then you also don't have the exclusivity, like Dolph Ziggler, for example, with TNA. Like he's in TNA, but he's also was just in GCW. He was also in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So you're not exclusive to him. You do have the advantage of booking him and him being on your shows, and that's great. But you can also see him elsewhere. What do you think business wise? Does that help you bottom line? Does that help you financially? Hey, I'm not paying this guy's $1 million contract. We're getting, he's supplementing in other places. Or does it stink because maybe people will watch GCW if they want to see Ziggler?
I think each promotion to succeed needs its core of talent that are most associated with it, even if they migrate, other places. Generally, you want to have them, if you can, give them enough work, and if you're in the position to give them enough money, that for your level, that's where they want to be. In that sort of like as challenger brands, like let's say like an MLW, an Impact, New Japan in the US, type of level, GCW to a certain degree, depending on sort of like how you're looking at it or thinking about it from like a media perspective in terms of being on television, not being on television, being streaming, and so on. You want certain groups to be associated most with you and sort of like see that as the primary place. Because if you're generally, if the person's migrating to all these places, it sort of like takes away from your brand, sort of like which one do they associate with you. But at the other hand, depending on the free agents, you want to get a little bit of that shine yourself while you
Yeah.
can. Like at the moment, I would say in terms of newly so, Mustafa Ali seems like the hottest talent out there. So he is sort of finding his footing of what he wants to do, maybe before he commits himself anywhere fully, or might just continue this journeyman process for some time. But just because he's with Impact, if you have the opportunity to book him with GCW or whatever it might be, you're not going to turn that down. I would say you just need your core, and then you have the supplemental elements that could either help you pop a buy rate or improve your attendance, or maybe move some merchandise related to that talent if they could commit to that degree.
Bobby Fish is coming in, but what about the distribution? What's going on with that for MLW?
So a good time to sort of look at where that stands. Of course, we've had a lot of controversy related to that, especially with the lawsuit, which has now been settled. But although some people are dim on it, being sports has really been such a boon and plus to MLW. From what we understand and what's been reported since the beginning, it's a paid deal. You often hear with wrestling like it's a barter or trade off, or even not so much anymore that you hear wrestling promotions would pay to be on the network. But the fact that it's paid gives them stability, and they've allowed them to explore different things. Like, if you imagine like dating world, they've allowed them to see others, to take a break and date someone else, and so on. But they've always allowed them back. So I don't know the nature of that, but it just seems to work for being, and it's been a wonderful safety net at the very least for MLW. As their being sports profile has shrunk, I'd imagine that the ratings on for MLW have as well. It's generally on the list of like most watched networks that are ranked by Nielsen. It's generally last or like one of the bottom three. However, there are more networks than that. This is just those that are ranked. So, in terms of the overall network, I believe last year in 2023 it was around 3,000 viewers in prime time. When WrestleNomics had the numbers for MLW a couple of years ago, it came out to be about that average. So one wouldn't imagine too much ratings. But also there's beIN Sports Extra, which is a Diginet. So a chart like for Sinclair when Ring of Honor was on, it was like a Charge or Comet, which at those times weren't very high profile, and those have actually become successful Diginets themselves. I think among the top 50 most watched networks. I would have to go back and check that, but beIN Sports Extras is somewhat lower profile. That they have 36 affiliates in the U.S. With a potential population coverage of 73 million, covering a total of just under 24% of the population, which includes New York and Chicago, of course, as the biggest markets, but one had and Dallas and Houston and so on. Sacramento is the next largest market of the top five, but to say that it covers 23% of the US, this has to be somebody that has a digital antenna and is searching, for these sub networks. So most people aren't doing that. I think I'd have to go back and check, but I think the estimate was about like 5% of the US, maybe 5 to 10% of the US population at a high does something like that. So obviously it's very low profile, but it is something supplemental to beIN Sports, notable in terms of their US coverage. Of course, Fight Plus, they have these premium live events, or however they're defined. I think something to watch with that is to see if that's renewed. I just get the sense that it's not getting a lot of buzz on Fight Plus, or at least with our X or Twitter or whatever. It's based on what we're liking and sharing, of course. But to me, I don't see a lot of Triller Plus, I guess would be the modern way of saying it. But I don't see a lot of buzz for MLW events. The last one came and went. I didn't really see much. I believe they are still distributing their weekly show on YouTube. But just looking at a recent announcement that we covered previously, MLW is kicking off 2024 with a change. In addition to airing premium live events on Triller Plus, MLW has a treat. As a thank you, MLW is giving fans one free signature event every month. That means you get a signature event and premium live event each month, one for free and one on Triller Plus. Each event will feature a who's who from the ever-expanding MLW roster of fighters. The first free signature event will took place on January 20th, entitled MLW Reload. Fans can watch nationwide on cable on beIN Sports at 10, as well as stream worldwide on YouTube. So that was interesting in that beIN Sports took more content. There was more content for YouTube, and the way that's written, Reload, I'd imagine this means that it's more of some of its prior content that's being distributed, utilized in a different way. Um, Previously, I believe they had deals maybe a couple of years ago with platforms like Pluto and other streaming platforms. I don't know if that's still being done. I didn't see that in my recent search, but interestingly, they have a number of international deals, which has been a strength for them for a while. So in the US, they are on IOZOT. Sorry, in the UK, they're on IOZOT TV on Sky. They're on, as Court Bauer had he explained to us when he appeared a while ago on the program. What? Sort of like sounding like a martial arts move or something. They're on Star Times, which I believe is the same distributor that Impact or TNA, sorry, signed a deal with. So covering Africa and the Middle East, and as well as in Poland, Fight Club Poland.
Man, there are all these other places, but I don't know if many people have it. Like, do you have beIN Sports? Like, do you have access? Because my buddy in Florida, when I stayed at his place over the summer, they had beIN Sports. But do you have it? Like, I'm trying to see what markets they're actually in.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Like, probably were you in Miami?
No, Orlando.
Okay, because I think that their U.S. offices are in Miami, definitely in Florida. So that makes sense that it would be there. So I have it on a premium tier, just like we were talking about last. I don't subscribe to that tier, but just like we were talking about last week, like Game Plus and the Fight Network, were on my premium tier. So the same for beIN Plus, which really restricts things.
Ah, it's interesting. Yeah, it just feels like not in enough places. You know what I mean? They're not getting as much coverage as they could.
Yeah, a few years ago they were self-described at least, but it looked like it was correct. Like one of the fastest growing, like sports cable networks, and maybe they peaked out just under 20 million, but then they lost some of. There was like one of the big soccer leagues, like international leagues that they had over here, and then they lost that, and then it just like started going downhill in terms of distribution. And I know it was under 13 million when it was last reported in terms of homes, but it might be under 10 million now. So in terms of an exposure platform, um, they're probably, well, I don't see what they're getting each week on YouTube, which we have some YouTube stats in a moment, but probably more people that are catching it are probably catching it through different means, YouTube, Triller Plus, and so on, rather than watching it on beIN Sports. The beIN Sports Plus, it's unranked, so I mean that speaks for itself in terms of like the smaller number of markets that it's in, but it's a larger potential platform than beIN Sports, but probably not too much addition to the bottom line in terms of numbers. But I think the importance of beIN Sports is that it pays, and whatever that rate is, this is all important to MLW.
Of course, Minoru Suzuki coming in again to MLW as well, so that's interesting. But what's some of the upcoming shows they got going on?
Yeah, so they had announced plans to be in a number of different markets, but thus far, on February 29th, they'll be in the Melrose Ballroom once again in Queens. So about 3.5 weeks out, there's still a fair amount of tickets, even multiple tickets in the first row, but it's a smaller venue, so they might still get there. On March 29th, they refer to it as Tampa and St. Petersburg, so the War Chamber. So that's a larger venue than they've run probably recently, and still there, multiple seats in the front row, although close to moving that out. But then second row and beyond, several seats still available there. About, depending on the section, about 7 rows deep in terms of on sale. And then May 11th, the Azteca Lucha show, they described it as some of the fastest selling tickets in the last few years for MLW, I believe. But one can still see on the ticket map multiple seats available in the front row. One of the strengths of MLW throughout its history has been its ability to build relationships, especially through Japan. I believe, John, that originally the idea of MLW was sort of to be all Japan in the US, and then maybe plans changed and the name changed as well. But though that sort of idea and ethos in terms of fusion and working with different promotions has continued. So a number of months ago, there was an announcement of CMLL and New Japan and MLW, of course, working together. 3 world-class organizations unite for a variety of crossover collaborations. So this is interesting as it plays out, because now, it's not exclusive one to the other, but at that time, CMLL didn't have a particular relationship with the US that stood out. AAA was working in AEW, and they still are, and to an extent, and AAA is working with Impact. But now CMLL is working with AEW. So
Yeah.
curious to see how that continues. But Mistico was just on their most recent show, and that's huge. I don't know if it translates as much to ticket sales for that 2,300 arena show. I wasn't tracking that as closely, but also uniquely, our friends from Oceania Pro Wrestling forged a relationship with MLW. Basically, MLW is coming over for their big show that's happening in Australia. So that's, if it's, I'd imagine like a site fee, that's found money. Looking at their social media through Social Blade, MLW has 181,000 subscribers, 26 million lifetime to date video views. They're ranked by Social Blade, for whatever it's worth, as a B minus over there. So not like a huge presence for on YouTube, but a presence nonetheless. And their X followers is just under 79,000. One of the interesting things with Boss Fight, with their action, or well, I guess you'd call them action. Yes, they call them action figures. Is that it takes a long time to sculpt and mold these things. That with the way talents move around with MLW, most of whom are gone, I guess. And when I went to, I'm not sure if you could buy them now or whatever it is, but when I went to MLW's website and then I went to, I guess it takes you to Boss Fight, it says like you could pre-order it and it was coming fall 2023. So I'm not sure if that was a typo or it's just been delayed, but the talent that they have on sale is Jacob Fatu. So, okay, so he'll still be on television. So that one you could say current. Alex Hammerstone, Mads Kruger, who just returned,
Yep.
Killer Cross, who's been gone a long time, Microman, now who I believe is finished up, EJ Naduka, who's finished, and Lance Dorado, who's finished. But they have a championship belt collection, so you could put belts. I guess you should put them all on Mads Kruger just to keep the belt safe. But yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't uncommon in every wrestling action figure series. There's some talents that go, but the fact that it's the majority of talents for the current line is a challenge.
Are you applying for any jobs with MLW?
So while it appears that some of these have been on the website for a long time, which they have, they're recently sharing some of these again. So I'm not applying at the moment, but They have listings for a video editor, video package editor, graphic artist, and sponsor and ad sales representative.
Oh, very interesting. Now, as far as MLW, I mean, obviously, we pretty much did a great deep dive there. We went pretty deep into them. They have a lot of different things going on. It seems like Raven is back in the fold. Matt Kruger's back. Maybe they're losing some people. Maybe they're gaining some people. Bushiroad just lost somebody pretty big time. But talk to us but maybe even before that, just talk to us. What's the latest going on with Bushiroad?
So one of the things that we've had our eye on, certainly as this has unfolded, has been this Chicago show, the Windy City Ride show at the Wintrust Arena. Um, that they put some initial tickets on sale. Those went quickly. The second run, sort of most of or all of the tickets that would be available in the lower bowl, based on their logistics, were put on sale. That ended up being a total of 4,559, according to WrestleTix. Now, it appears that the second time around, the ticket brokers were thought they were getting smart, so they ate up probably more than 1,000 of these lower bowl tickets that are just sitting there on sale. So when New Japan went into this third row now, where they opened up the upper tier as much as possible, I think it's just a couple of the sections that weren't opened up based on their logistics. They're part of the arena that they're using. There was a ton of tickets put on sale, so those, as of today, as of we're recording this, those did not move so quickly. So I think they moved about 200 additional tickets. The ones in the upper rows are pretty cheap, $19. But you may see the brokers start discounting their tickets, especially, right before the event, in the lower tier. So we'll see how like one meets the other. But now it's a capacity of just over 7,000 potentially. So they're just under 5,000 tickets sold. I'm going to be careful about speculating too much on this event further, just because I was so wrong at the beginning.
Yes.
So, but I do want to emphasize that it's been a big win for New Japan. Literal sister promotion, Stardom, that Rossy Ogawa was fired or apparently was planning to leave, but was accused somewhat of poaching talent there. But he's going to be starting his own promotion. I don't know as deeply the machinations of the day-to-day running of a Stardom, but certainly I know Rossy Ogawa. He is always, to me, the face of Stardom. Sometimes I don't want to speak out of turn, or sometimes people have accused him of some sleazy tactics, I guess, to put it very broadly, in terms of earlier promotion days and sort of positioning the talents with photographs on promotional materials. I think with a previous promotion, those sort of things, I think certainly it's not justified, but it's not uncommon to sort of have different promoters that are promoting women's wrestling and who are males, enter this gray zone of potential accusation or whatever. I don't want to make that sound like it's more than it is, but that sort of talk has been out there potentially from others in the past. But just from a business perspective, really curious to see how this affects Stardom, because I think from their financial reports they were successful, and that for me, what I'm most curious about, because we talked about it a lot on the show, is Sukeban. So who was the conduit to talent that's coming from, I believe, a fair amount of the talent was from Stardom that were taking on different personalities. So just to see if there's any effect on things in that way.
Do you think that he will have some sort of maybe bigger part of Sukeban, or like what will his role be kind of going forward? Because he did kind of popularize women's wrestling in Japan.
Yeah, and I would imagine, and we've talked about the founders that that would be something that somebody that they'd want to talk to more. I guess it's partly sort of like that they have to have had some decent relationship with the promotion in Japan already, or promotions in Japan already, to have access to such talents rather than like a reach around or go around possibly. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him like getting more involved and visible on these type of shows, but a little bit outside of my area of expertise. But I was surprised. I guess we shouldn't be too surprised with Tony Khan's ex postings, but like he was celebrating this firing, and it just seemed like sort of below his stature to do that. Like, why? You're a billionaire. You might not have liked, politically how your access to talent at the Star was going, but this person lost their job, so kind of like a weird thing. But some people questioned Tony Khan's actions before, but other wrestling promoters, not a big deal, I guess.
I guess could be definitely deemed a little immature to kind of do that, but I guess he was not happy with some of the talent that he wasn't able to get sometimes from Stardom.
Yeah, but and not to go down the road that a lot of people could go down. And I'm not very dim on AEW. I do like it when I see it. Like he has so much talent already, so like start making use of that. But I don't want to
Yeah,
go
right,
too deep
right.
down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. What about GC Dub? They're going to be in Rochester and a debut, another debut for them.
Yeah, so this was a insider scoop, not at the moment, but which I wasn't able to share just because I didn't ask Brett when he shared it with me. I'm sure when he did share it, it was something where he didn't say like don't say anything, but I just wanted to hold it till they formally announced it, because when he was hinting at it, I like showed a map of New York State, and I was like everything above New York City basically I think is fair game. And uh knowing that he was an upstater, I was thinking it would be Rochester or a surrounding area like Buffalo. I was thinking just because they like to use song lyrics in their promotional titles, that I was thinking like they would go for Buffalo, the Goo Goo Dolls, like Broadway's Dark Tonight. I don't know if that's their particular genre,
Right.
but looks like a cool venue. If they're using, there's a couple of different spaces in the venue that they're planning to use on March 24th, but one of them, in terms of a concert hall, holds up to 1,000. So you put a ring in and so on, and staging. So maybe that's a little bit less, but just under 1,000, maybe 700, 800 tops. That feels like the right move for GCW. And then a successful weekend that Brett was reflecting on recently that we talked about already, but had a great wrestling weekend. LA and always will be a special place. I'm proud of what we built and accomplished in LA over the last 5 plus years. The only one that might not be proud is David Arquette, but he got through it. And Phoenix was very special. I love bringing GCW to new places and making new fans. Can't wait to come back. So the venue in Phoenix looks very small. It looks like just a few rows and people were up against the wall, but they sold that out very quickly. So love to see the right venue selection and making it a success. I think a lot of promoters can learn from that.
What's going on with the NWA? Is this promoter, Billy Corgan, is he learning anything?
So one of the things that he and his team are doing smartly is this selection of Dothan, Alabama, as the Hard Times pay per view. I don't know. I mean, we reflected on the ticket sales last week. We'll come back to that again next week. But they got some nice local coverage of this show, especially calling it the the first television event coming to Dothan in over a decade. So I don't know if you would call Dothan like a mid-sized market, but it's not a tiny market, and it has a lot of wrestling history. So when you can discover something like that where they haven't had a high-profile event of any sort, I think there is the opportunity to get a lot of press for that. And Dothan, Alabama, sort of feels like um, the right city and the right type of venue for NWA. So good for them on that. So a recent interview with Billy Corgan on Busted Open Radio, transcribed from our friends at Post Wrestling. So I just want to share a little bit of that piece. Beginning with the February 6th show, new episodes of NWA Power are going to be pushed out via the CW app. So Corgan appealed around Busted Open. Corgan shared that there were talks with the CW about NWA's content airing on the television network side of their content distribution. He said the CW felt it'd be better for it to be on the streaming service. He added that he thinks the network knew what was coming with the NXT joining their content portfolio beginning in fall 2024. When people heard that we were going to be on the streaming side, there were a few raised eyebrows, as if there was some sort of kick in the shin. And we had talked to CW at a different time about being on the broadcast side versus the streaming, but they just decided the streaming side was the better side for us. And I think it's because they knew what was coming. Of course, they're more inside on the baseball than we are. And of course, with them signing XT on the broadcast side, but being on the streaming service is a huge deal. The level of competition is really fierce, as you see. So this is a big move for us. It's hopefully a big step into a bigger future. So I guess Corgan one day will have to account for saying that there's two I guess network deals or television deals that were coming on major. I don't know if he said major networks, but something like that. So to
Yeah, he
reflect
did.
on if Okay, so reflect on if this was a change there. But as I mentioned before, and not to make a bigger deal of this than it is, but the CW app quietly, right, has WOW and NWA. That's two pretty decent brands if you're looking to build something. So I don't know if this is part of the strategy at all and how significant it would be, but like if you have the NX, I mean, you will have the not the NXT, right? Like Bret Hart, NXT on the CW, and then you have these like crawlers or advertisements or whatever pitches to go to the CW app for more pro wrestling. That could be something that they build up. So I'm curious to see if there are going to be some other brands that they pull over.
Now, as far as my longtime close personal friend Oliver Bateman is concerned, what's going on with him? I know he always covers a good amount of wrestling.
Yeah, thankfully no one died. Oliver is like the man, but especially like obituaries, like
Yeah, yep.
those are
That's
amazing.
usually when I get him on. We usually talk about obits.
Yeah, so and he loves the line doing the work. He had an interesting article in the Washington Examiner on wrestling and the recreation of cable. So hopefully I've clipped a fair amount of it without belaboring the points, but I just wanted to go over some of it and go over follow Oliver Bateman on social, but also check out this article directly. Want to watch a niche sport? Good luck. That's spread across ESPN Plus, Flow Sports, Fight Plus, and UFC Fight Pass. It'll run you upwards of $50 a month if you want access to all of it. How about the NFL? You need CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN, Peacock, Prime Video, NFL Network to access all of that. That's 3 broadcast networks, a cable network, 2 streaming services, and a premium cable channel if you're keeping up. But now that WWE has announced it cut a deal with Netflix to move its flagship Raw show to the streaming service for $5 billion over 10 years, it's with pro wrestling that this confusion, the verification of content, one academic called it, hits closest to home. Wrestling was marginal in the sense that it wasn't covered in the Times or the nightly news in the absence of some unsavory scandal, but it was also ubiquitous. It had a large, albeit silent audience of redneck and white trash viewers for whom it constituted a shared cultural experience, back when such a common bond was truly possible. My edit, yes, but not only that group, of course. In those days, even if I had nothing else to discuss with my peers, I could fall back on pro wrestling. This shift from a locally adored sport with staggering local ratings in the 70s and a far larger workforce of locally based wrestlers to an internationally valuable asset um, in this. In the streaming wars reflects a significant change in how we consume media. The local markets that once embraced wrestling as a communal event now encounter it as part of an expansive, often bewildering, digital landscape in which they represent tiny nodes on a vast subscriber map. WWE's huge rights deal with Netflix is one of several it's recently made, most of which we know about, all of which we know about. This includes NXT. Okay, and if that wasn't confusing enough, Raw, which airs on USA, will move to Netflix in 2025. Granted, the WWE shows have jumped from network to network throughout their existence, including stints on Spike TV, Sci-Fi, the UPN, NBC, MSG Network. Well, MSG Network, it was always like supplemental, but some cool some cool elements. But 2024, at least in theory, was supposed to be a time of media consolidation. However, the only thing that's been consolidated is the WWE itself, merged into the same umbrella entity, TKO Group. Actually, definitely everyone go check out the article. As we're recording this, John, I'm not sure if you yet heard the news, and it's almost unbelievable that Discovery, Fox, and Disney are going to form this like massive app conglomerate where you can access all of their sports content and all of the content from all of their channels.
Pretty nuts to put that all into one, because there's so much sports on each one of them that you're combining it all now into one is pretty crazy. And they're going to split it into thirds. So pretty crazy.
So, in my opinion, I don't see this getting past antitrust
Wow.
from the federal government. It depends on without a deep expertise on this, the Biden administration is watching this much closer than I would guess the Trump administration. Although Trump, right, we would talk about this story for years. The Sinclair deal, right, where it was going to buy all these Tribune networks, and that wasn't allowed to go through. But here, you're going to have one gigantic shared platform that will have like all of the major sports in it. So the NBA, can they negotiate against themselves? So they'd be each negotiating to have it, but then it becomes part of one. So that's like for competitiveness in terms of content. But on the other hand, the consumer, what if you don't, what if you want sports? So it's like the one shop to go to. So I don't think this will hold up for long.
Wow. Interesting. Now, as far as some quick hitters, some miscellaneous stuff, what is going on? Maybe start us off with our good old close personal friend, David Marquez, over there in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
Yes, and I think this is my biggest miscellaneous section. It just kept growing. So Marquez always up to something, especially growing his footprint of various syndicated distribution. So United Wrestling Network's Derby City Wrestling was cleared by Fox 56 in Lexington, Kentucky. So Derby City, of course, a Kentucky-based offshoot. So as they grow their profile there. Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling, this was shocking to me, has been around since 1975. So Herald Publications had an article by Zachary Daum covering it. Just want to give a snippet or cover this a little bit just because it's so significant to me and often not covered. Led by the promoter Herb Simmons, SCW has not only showcased exciting matches, but has also become a custodian of the rich history of St. Louis. Simmons started his journey as a fan, growing up watching wrestling at the Chase. I got to meet a gentleman named Larry Matzik, who lived in Belleville. He went to work for Sam Mushnick. And he emphasized the roots of true wrestling, old school wrestling promotion. So Simmons started SCW, strives to provide fans with the same kind of excitement and nostalgia that their parents and grandparents experienced. They do a lot of nonprofit work. They're dedicated to the St. Louis market. They tape monthly shows at the Belleville Fairgrounds and TV tapings, and they also have access to classic content, so they intersperse it with Ric Flair, Bruiser Brody, and Lou Thesz. They're also having a fan fest, which has some legendary wrestlers from the 1950s to 1980s. So I'm really curious to see who's coming from the 1950s. That sounds really cool. So good for them. Then Ciencia Labs, which is a cannabis company, one of the out of the box ideas that they use to promote their brand is they actually have lucha libre events. So we'll have to talk about Kevin Kleinrock about an idea like that, but it seems that that's going well for them. So this one was a little shocking. The Palladium Times Square, John, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this venue. This one has been renamed in Times Square a number of times. The Best Buy arena is Best Buy Theater is just one of them. The PlayStation Theater. This
Yep.
would be most familiar for us talking about it with the recent New Japan show. What was that? About a year and a half ago. That seemed to do really well in terms of ticket sales. This venue can hold up to 2,000 attendees, depending on the logistics. But the reason that I was shocked was there'll be a Little Person event, Little Mania Wrestling, March 6th and 7th. And they put on the bottom of the poster, which rightly so, that it's registered with the New York State Athletic Commission. So just to make sure they didn't have any problems there. But
Gotta
I
be.
don't know who's exactly putting this on, but it's going to be a tough ticket sell. Um, so yeah, so curious to see what was the thinking going to that. Although we have seen Little Person Wrestling do very well in
When you're looking at
how.
that place, that is a pretty cool
Mhm.
venue. Did you notice also with the midget wrestling, if you will, quote unquote, if they're even allowed to say that, did you notice that they were getting pretty good ratings? Not this company, but the mini brawlers were getting pretty good ratings.
I just came across that sort of in the abstract that I believe that it was doing better than some AEW shows, but I do have to I look at those ratings. Brandon, if you're listening, you got to get the brawler Nation ratings in your queue, because I've been lazy to check it out myself. But there seems to be a curiosity with Little Person Wrestling. What was that? Was it the Learning Channel or the History Channel that they had a whole family of little persons, and then they had like an offshoot
Yep.
shows as well. So I, I don't know if it's like a good or bad thing to be curious about people that have, um, such a circumstance rather than just thinking of them as just people themselves, whether they're athletes or academics or whatever they are. But America seems to have a curiosity for such a thing.
What is Wrestle Rave, by the way? What's going on with them?
So to me, it was a mystery. I not to dim them as a promotion at all, but out of I believe Texas. But the part that was curious to me and why I'm covering them is that so this was an interesting thing. I'm sure you saw it, John. Jordan Grace came across this Ugandan promotion, and they're wrestling without an actual formal ring, as you would think about it, like
Right.
poles in the ground or the ring posts, rope or string, whatever it is, they put on the ground, whatever they could find, sort of backyard ingenuity. And she wanted to get in contact with them, so connected her, or actually just tagged WrestleMap, and they shared some ways to get in touch. And I'm not sure if she has, but I know that there's a fundraiser going on now for them to get a ring. But what I give credit for WrestleRave for is to immediately start working with them to bring some of their content to their own YouTube page. So while it's hot,
Yeah.
that they gained permission to collaborate with them in such a way. So that was the element that I wanted to highlight. Um, so there's TVS was sort of a semi national network many years ago that was run by the person that started the IWA in the 70s and then was an owner of the Chicago Cubs. I should have his name in front of me. Unfortunately, I don't. But
Jerry Reinsdorf?
not him, but he was like with Pro Wrestling
Oh, I'm thinking
USA.
White Sox. I'm thinking White Sox. I'm sorry, you
Yeah.
said Chicago Cubs. Okay.
So he was like the guy also that was like Pro Wrestling USA. He was at the table like to try and get these promotions together to challenge WWF at the time. So one of these people that keeps like floating through history. Once we see the name, and certainly those listening will be able to look it up quickly, and we'll get that. But all of this is to say that that network died many years ago, and whomever is running this network in name only, maybe there it looks like there's some over the air content to it, so some streaming content to it. So that harkening back to its roots, which they refer to, they're airing a promotion called All Pro Wrestling Nevada. So I guess a long setup just to say that, but I just found it like just to be a little of a curious thing. Um, just looking at around the horn in terms of the world of wrestling, EWA Rage in a Cage 2024 was sold out, and the more high-profile Maryland Championship Wrestling Winter Blast. When I last looked, there was just one reserved seat, so likely that's sold, and this type of event typically sells out for them. So that was probably a sellout. And also, Freelance Wrestling was sold out on February 9th. Oh, Eddie Einhorn is the IWA owner.
Ah, there you go. Not to be confused with Lois Einhorn from Ace Ventura.
So we're not leaving our audience wanting. So uh, you will not go without. You now know the mystery solved. Eddie Einhorn.
EWA Rage in the Cage. Big time? Is that big time or no?
So EWA. So this is a different promotion, but somebody of note on Twitter that covers some of the history news and so on is like the promoter, although I don't know if he gives his name on there. So just a little bit of a flavor around the horn. It just seems like independent wrestling is not necessarily selling out everywhere, but you're seeing these successes, all over the place.
MCW. What's going on with them? Maryland Championship Wrestling.
So they tend to do really well, especially with their high profile shows. They bring in some of the high profile talent, and I think it's a firehouse, something like that, unless they switch venues to their show. So that was probably a sellout. And like I mentioned, freelance wrestling on February 9th in Logan Square Auditorium was also a sellout.
What is freelance wrestling? What's going on with them? This will, I guess, would be the final story.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't comment too much on their day-to-day machinations. I wish I could, but I just wanted to cover that they were able to sell out in a venue that's fairly known for pro wrestling in the area, which is the Logan Square Auditorium.
Interesting. And just one final note, a little bit of wrestling related because he was involved with TNA Wrestling for a little bit and was a huge wrestling fan and even a big part of Dan Henderson's entrance music for UFC Made in America. Rest in peace, Toby Keith, absolute legend in the country music world and a huge wrestling fan as well.
Yeah, a really TNA to a certain extent. Get some attention when it was starved for it to really get off the ground. So really looking forward to Jeff Jarrett reflecting on his relationship with Toby Keith and what he meant to TNA. Rest in peace. I think Toby Keith was just in his early 60s, so certainly a surprise to me to learn of his past.
Yeah, R.I.P. Toby Keith, absolute legend, one of the best. Saw him in concert 4 times, unbelievable in concert. So R.I.P. Toby. But let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Check out the website tmptempire.com. Lavie, what do you got going on in this crazy world?
So follow me on Twitter, Lavie Marg, Lavie Check out my long form articles on Lion Cub Job Search, the business of the business, and check out our PW Ponderings. Of course, we are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings.
All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.